All right, I will say good morning. I hope that all is well. My apologies for the lack of live share this morning, but a great zechus Baruch Shem to be able to continue to learn with everyone now. I want to thank all of our sponsors. Am Yisroel Hashem, all of these sponsors will be listed Am Yisroel Hashem in the description on the podcast, as well as in the notes on the YouTube channel. And a shkoyach to everyone for their incredible generosity. May all of the neshamas have an Aryeh, the families in Nechama, besuros, tovos, HaKohen, the return of our hostages, and the success of our holy soldiers. The Mishnah says as follows: Hamagadef. We are beginning on Nun Vav. Today's daf is Nun Vav and Aleph. We are picking up at the Mishnah on Nun Ham and Beis 55b. Hamagadef eno chayv ad sheyifarish Hashem. So we're talking about now. We're transitioning to the discussion about one who chas v'shalom curses the Ribono Shel Olam. So a person is only chayiv for cursing. The English word that's used is blaspheming, but really what it means is cursing HaKadosh Baruch Hu until he actually uses the name of Hashem. Now Rashi points out over here, if yafresh es Hashem, Rashi says means sheyizkar es Hashem, avalim lo hotzi shem mipiv, ela sham Hashem yotzi mipi acher u'baruch hu pater. In other words, that in order for a person to be chayav for cursing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they have to actually articulate the name themselves. On Rabbi Shmuel Silber says, top of Nun Vav. So this is very interesting. How Rabbi Shmuel Silber describes the way they would adjudicate a blasphemy case in Beis Din. So b'chol yom danan asayid mekinui yaki yosi es yosi. So when the case was being adjudicated, right? Remember again, obviously a case like this. A case like this is adjudicated based on testimony. So what's going to happen? Witnesses are going to come in and they're going to say, we saw, Ruvain curse HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, testimony generally requires an actual retelling of actual events as they occurred. We don't want the actual retelling of events over here because we don't want the witnesses actually articulating the cursing or the blasphemy of Hashem's name. So instead what we do is we employ a kinui. Kinui literally means like a nickname. So in other words, instead of saying that Ruvain said Hashem should curse Hashem, we use a kinui, a nickname. Yaki Yosi Es Yosi. Yosi, which again, in the Marashal points out, Yosi is used because it's 4 letters, right? Like just like you have Yud K Vav K, that's the name of Hashem. Yosi is Yud Vav Samech Yud. So Yosi should go ahead and strike a Yosi. Now we're going to see, by the way, that the formulation of Megadef, of blasphemy, is that it's interesting. We'll see this where this is developed. But if a person just says "Cursed is Hashem," chas v'shalom, that's not blasphemy. But rather, the way blasphemy takes form is Hashem should curse Hashem. That's why that's the lashon over here. So throughout the entire judicial proceedings, we don't actually articulate the curse that Reuven uttered. Instead, we use like a euphemism or a nickname. So the Gemara says, "Nigmar hadin lo hargim b'kinui alamotzin." So okay, here's the issue. Once the Beis Din has reached the decision that Reuven is indeed guilty, you can't convict someone if the witnesses were never explicit in their testimony. So as much as we wanted to, avoid explicitity up until this point, if you're going to convict him and find him guilty, we need to actually hear from the witnesses what Reuven explicitly said. So how do we do this? We tell everybody to leave the courtroom except for the dayanim and the witnesses. We ask the more senior of the 2 witnesses. We tell the witness, tell us explicitly, what did you hear? And he tells us, so now at this point, the witness actually shares the explicit curse uttered by Reuven. And when the Dayanim hear this, they stand up, the Korin, they tear their clothing, and they do not go ahead and mend the tear. Vashini Omer Ani Kamahu, right? The second witness says, I agree with what the first one said. Vashlishi Omer Af Ani Kamahu. If there's a third witness, he also agrees as well. So interestingly enough, we can get away with the nicknames or the euphemisms up until the point of the verdict. But if Beis Din wants to actually pass a guilty verdict, we require explicit testimony from the witnesses, clear the court, have the senior witness say explicitly. We don't need the other witnesses to then say it explicitly as well. We just need them to confirm that they indeed heard the same thing. Says the Gemara Tana, Achi is barech shem b'shem minhani mili. So interestingly enough, if you look at the Mishnah, so the way that this blasphemy, the way that this cursing of Hashem takes place is one curses the name of Hashem with Hashem. Hashem should curse Hashem. So So the Gemara says, where do you know that from? Well, how do we know if that's the model? Damar Shmuel. The Gemara says, Damar Kra, v'nokev shem, b'nokvo shem yamos. So it's interesting because the pasuk the Gemara is quoting over here is v'nokev shem Hashem, mos yumas. Now the Gemara is assuming the word nokev means to curse. One who curses the name of Hashem will die. Ragom yirgemu go kalaida. He should be stoned. Keger azrach b'nokvo shem yumas. And then it says again, when he curses the name of Hashem, he will be put to death. So there's two expressions of cursing. So from here, the Gemara says that it means you curse the name of Hashem with the name of Hashem. Hashem should curse Hashem. So how do you know that nokev means to curse? So this is actually by Bilam, right? When Bilam was trying to curse Klal Yisrael, so again, no matter how much money Balak gave him, how many resources Balak gave him, Bilam essentially said, what do you got for me? If God doesn't want people to be cursed, they're not going to be cursed. And the law of itself comes from here. Okay, maybe v'nokev doesn't mean to curse, but rather again, v'nokev actually means to pierce, right? To go ahead and let's say take a knife and pierce it into the name of Hashem written in a sefer. V'asaras, the Gemara says, vayikov char b'dalto. Pasuk says again, lashon of vayikov means to make a hole. V'asaras and the law will come from here. V'avartem es shemam lo sasu kin Hashem elokechem. To which the Gemara says, no, ba'ina shem b'shem v'leka. Here's the difference. The difference, remember again, in that original pasuk is it says v'nokev shem. B'nokvo shem. There are two mentions of the name of Hashem. So somehow this act of blasphemy must include two names of Hashem. And that's missing over here in the case of the knife. One is piercing the name of Hashem, but it's only one name of Hashem that's being impacted. So maybe you're placing two names of God, one on top of the other, and piercing them both with a knife simultaneously. That's destroying two names of Hashem. To which the Gemara says, that's one act of piercing, followed by another act of piercing, but there's no simultaneity there. So maybe you can say, maybe he wrote the name of Hashem on the tip of the knife, then took that tip of the knife and plunged it into another name of Hashem. So he's erasing the name of Hashem with another name of Hashem. To which the Gemara says, no, he's not erasing with the name of Hashem. It's not the name of Hashem. It's not the name of Hashem on the knife that's erasing the name of Hashem in print, but rather again, it's the knife that's destroying the name of Hashem. Ema perushe shmehu. Maybe v'nokev means articulation of the name. So the Gemara says, so Rashi says over here, perushe, posiyaseh perusha. Maybe the prohibition over here is to actually pronounce the name of Hashem. For example, when we say the name of Hashem, or we see the name of Hashem, Yud Hey and then Vav Hey, we never articulate it as the letters are written. So maybe the prohibition over here is to go ahead and to actually articulate the name. Because again, we see the lashon of nikvu is a lashon of, identified by their names. Moshe and Aaron took the people identified by their names. To which the Gemara says, and the lav will be from here. To which the Gemara says, here's the problem. So first of all, remember, we're kind of married to this model because the actual pasuk that discusses the blasphemy or cursing the name of Hashem has this double lashon of v'nokev shem, b'nokvo shem, which means that whatever blasphemy means, it's going to mean utilization of two names of Hashem. So articulation of the name doesn't satisfy that criteria. Va'od havi le'azharas aseh, v'azharas aseh lo shema azhar. Furthermore, you're learning out the lav from a positive statement of es Hashem lokech atira. And any lav, any prohibition learned out from a positive statement is not really a prohibition. Okay? Ibaysim, the other possibility is Amar Kra, Vayikov Vayikalel. So we'll say the other possibility is, how do we know that ultimately, again, we're talking about over here that Vayikov, Nokev, and Benakvo means to curse? Because you have another pasuk. The pasuk says Vayikov Vayikalel. Right? The pasuk over here is talking about, says as follows. Vayikov ben Aisha Yisrael es Hashem Vayikalel Vayaviu also al Moshe v'Shem imo. Good. So what I was talking about over here, quoting the actual story in the midbar of the Mekalel, there was a man who actually got up and cursed HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the lashon in this pasuk is both Vayikov and Vayikalel. What do you see from here? The memra did no gave klalahu. So you see from here that these two words are synonymous. That no gave means to curse. I says the Gemara Dilma Adda Avitarvayu. Maybe not. Maybe they're two separate things. And maybe halacha might say again, you're only chayv if you do both. In other words, maybe like we said before, maybe no cave means to articulate the name, and vaikala obviously means to curse. Maybe you have to do both. Tush Gemara says, no, lo, sanvait chag dichsiv, hotzies hamakala v'lo ksiv, hotzies hanoke b'hamakala. No, it's interesting because by the execution of the makala, remember again, in the Jewish, when the Jews were in the desert, there were two dramatic acts of desecration of halacha. One was the Makoshesh, the guy who gathered wood on Shabbos, Chil Shabbos, desecration of Shabbos, and the other was the Makalal, the individual who went ahead and blasphemed, cursed the HaKadosh Baruch Hu in public. So when they executed the Makalal, it says, take out the Makalal. It doesn't say take out the no cave and the Makalal, right? So you see from here the fact that it just calls for the Makalal indicates to us that no cave and makalal mean the same thing, which both mean ultimately cursing of the name of Hashem. Shema mina chadahu. You see from here that they're both really one thing. So we'll say, so therefore what comes out of here is as follows. So therefore now we have the model. The model of Megadev, of one who curses HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is one who uses the name of Hashem to curse the name of Hashem. An interesting formulation, but nevertheless, that's the biblical prohibition, really based on the idea that the pasuk that talks about blasphemy uses the lashon of v'nokev shem Hashem and b'nokvo shem yomos. It's two lashonos. Uses the expression of curse twice and shame twice. So from here we see that in order to be chayiv biblically for cursing the name of Hashem, one must curse the name of Hashem with the name of Hashem. Okay, so Tan Rabbanon, Ish Mataun Omar, what does the pasuk mean when it says Ish? So if you remember again, this is Ve'el B'nei Yisrael Tidaber Le'mor, Ish Ki Yekalel Elokav V'nasachet O. This is every person when they curse Hashem will bear his sin. Who's the Ish? Mataun Omar Ish. Says the Gemara is very interesting. Ish l'Rabbi Sasa of Dekocham Shemuz Harnal Berchas Hashem. So we'll say, so now the Gemara is going to take an interesting turn over here. And the interesting turn is going to go, it really is a fascinating sugya. I mean, not as fascinating as yesterday, thank you, Rabbi Richter. But fascinating sugya. I'm sorry, I neglected to thank Rabbi Richter for giving shir over the last few days, a tremendous shkayach and a thank you. It's actually not such easy sugyas. So the Gemara says as follows. So here we're transitioning to the interesting topic of Sheva Mitzvos B'nei Noach, 7 Noachide laws. So the Gemara says, what does it mean when it says ish, right? Why does it say ish twice? So the Gemara says, Ish Rabbi says, to teach us that Gentiles are liable for cursing the name of Hashem the same way that Jews are. A fascinating halacha. Furthermore, whenever Gentiles are executed, right, for violation of one of the 7 Noachide laws, so they're only executed with saif, with sword, beheading. Because any execution that Bnei Noach have is only with the sword. Is only with saif. So Rashi says over here, so we'll actually discuss this a little bit later on, because the only time that we find an execution mentioned, not in the context of Jews, is back in Bereshis when the Torah speaks about the liability for one who takes life. And it says, the lashon of the pasuk is ba'adam damo yishafach, right? Person takes life, his blood will be spilled. And interestingly enough, the Gemara understands that to mean saif, a sword beheading. We'll talk about that in greater depth in a little bit. So here's one second. To learn that out from here. We learn that from here. First word line. Hashem Zuber Hashem. So we'll say here, the pasuk is actually really interesting drasha. This is by Adam Arishon. Get ready for this. It's about Adam Rishon. So the pasuk Gemara is quoting is Vayitzav Hashem Elokim al ha'adam lemor mikol itz hagan achol tochal. So Hashem says to Adam, you could eat from any tree of the garden that you want. Now subsequently Hashem says to Adam, but you can't eat of the eitz das tovara, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life. Okay, so now the Gemara breaks down this pasuk. Hashem, when it says the word Hashem, what does that mean? So the Gemara understands that this pasuk is the blueprint for the 7 Noachite laws, which is interesting because essentially the first command that Hashem gives to man, right? Adam, remember again, Adam is the father of all humanity. So the first command that Hashem gives to Adam, the Gemara understands, is the blueprint for the 7 Noachite laws. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, Lo Nitzruch, so what's Hashem? Hashem is Birchas Hashem. Hashem tells us that one is not allowed to blaspheme or curse the name of Hashem. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, Lo Nitzrucha El Rabos Hakinui Vali B'Rabbi Meir. This is coming to include, for Shevet as Bnei Noach, even nicknames of Hashem. Right? In other words, not explicit names of Hashem, but other names that Hashem is known by. Disanyo, Ish Ki Kalel Elokav V'Nasacheto. Pas says if a man will curse Hashem, he will bear his sin. What is the Pas coming to teach us? We already learned, V'no gave Shem Hashem mos yumas. The pasuk says, if you curse the name of Hashem, you will die. No gave Shem mos yumas. You might have thought you're only chayiv if you curse the actual name of Hashem. The Gemara says, how do we know that this applies even to other nicknames of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or descriptive names of Hashem? TALMUD, for example, like Elokim is a good example of this, right? Ado and then Noi. These are all descriptive names of Hashem. How do I know this? So we'll say this happens to be the position of Rabbi Meir. Meir holds that halacha l'maisa. One is not only chayiv for megadef, for blasphemy, for cursing Hashem with the primary names of Hashem, but even chayiv for the secondary names of Hashem. Rabbi Meir, the say no. Hashem hamiyuchad bilba, Hashem hamiyuchad b'misa, b'akin nevazar. The Chacham disagree, and this actually we pass like the Chacham that one is only chayiv execution if you curse the explicit name of Hashem, the unique name Yud Hey and then Vav Hey. But if you curse any of the other names of Hashem, that is a lav, that is a prohibition, but not punishable by death. And Rabbi said that is indeed how he paskin. Upliga de Rav Meisha, and this argues on Rav Meisha as well as Rav Meisha. Same Rav Meisha. Ben Noach shebeirechas Hashem. If a Ben Noach goes ahead and curses the name of Hashem, bikinuyim, and he does so again with nicknames, so the Rabbanon chayiv, he's chayiv according to the Rabbanon. So my time, what's the reason? I've said this seems to argue on what we just said, because the Chum just said before that Allah Chalamaysi only chayiv if you do the actual name. Rav Meisha seems to be machmir ultimately again on a Ben Noach. He says it's only a Jew who's only chayiv for cursing the actual name of Hashem, but a Ben Noach will be chayiv for cursing even one of the kinuyim, even one of the nicknames of Hashem. My time, what's the reason? The Amar Kra, Kager Ka'ezrach. Ger ve'ezrach hu duba benak v'shem. It's only a ger and a ezrach. In other words, right? In other words, it is only a Jew, right, and a convert who are chayiv if they curse the explicit name of Hashem. Aval oved kochav mafilu bikinui. But oved kochav is going to be chayiv for blasphemy, even if he uses one of the descriptive or nicknames of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Very interesting. So we'll say, so fundamental machlokes. So in other words, so on one hand, there's machlokes in general about Jews. Are Jews chayiv if they curse a nickname or a secondary name of Hashem? So that Rabbi Meir says yes, Chachamim say no. And then interestingly enough, Rav Meisha comes along and Rav Meisha says a Jew will only be chayiv if he curses the primary name of Hashem, but a Ben Noach will be chayiv even if he curses one of these secondary names of Hashem. Very interesting. Rabbi Meir, Hai Kager Ka'ezrach my avale. What does Rabbi Meir do with this phrase Kager Ka'ezrach? So which the Gemara says, my avale, Ger ve'ezrach beskila. It'll teach us that a Ger and Ezrach gets skila, aval ovei kochavim b'sayif. But ovei kochavim will be executed ultimately again by a sword. Sadait chamina, I would have thought, holav israbu. I would have thought that since maybe Ovdei Kohavim, right, or Bnei Noach are included in the prohibition of blasphemy, that they should get the same death penalty as a Jew, i.e. skila. Kamash Shmuel know that whenever a Ben Noach is executed for some transgression, he always receives saif. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha with Rabbanon, Haike Ger Kezrach my avale. What does Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha according to Rabbanon? What does he do with this phrase? So the Gemara says, Ger ve'ezrach hu duba inan shem b'shem. It's only a Jew who is chayiv in this, what we'll call this framework of blasphemy that we established before, namely, that you only chayiv if you curse the name of Hashem with another name of Hashem. Aval oved kochavim lo ba'inon shem b'shem. But again, if an oved kochavim, even if he just curses the name of Hashem, doesn't do shame b'shem, doesn't use the name to curse the name, he's going to be chayiv as well. Incredible. Ish lamali. Why the phrase ish? Dibra Torah kalashon b'nei Adam. Ultimately, again, the Torah is just espousing the halacha the way that people speak. Incredible. So we'll say there are 3 takeaways so far from this daf that are important to take with us. Number 1, the construct for biblical blasphemy, for which there is a death penalty for Jews, right, is going to be only if you curse the name of Hashem with the name of Hashem. Which name of Hashem? So again, we're going to say that we paskin halacha l'maisa like the Chachamim. Namely, it's only if you use the actual name of Hashem, Yud Hey and then Vav Hey. No kinuyim, no descriptions, nothing else. Just the actual name of the Ribono Shel Olam. Bnei Noach will be chayiv again for blasphemy as well. But interestingly enough, Bnei Noach will be chayiv even if they curse any of the other nicknames or descriptive names, even if they don't use the explicit name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Furthermore, a Jew, when he's chayiv for blasphemy, will get skila, and a Ben Noach ultimately will get saif, will get beheading with the sword. Now again, that's not unique over here to Megadev. Anytime that a Ben Noach is going to be punished, he's always punished in this same way. Incredible. Tan Rabbanan, Shem Mitzvos Nisab B'nei Noach. There are Shem Mitzvos B'nei Noach. What's a really interesting sugya? Dinin. So Dinin is the halacha to establish a judicial system, right? Birchas Hashem, cursing of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Avodah Zarah. So in other words, number 1, establish a court system. Number 2, you're not allowed to curse the name of Hashem. Number 3, Avodah Zarah, can't worship Avodah Zarah. Number 4, immorality, Gilui Arayos. Number 5, Shichos Damim, can't murder. Number 6, Gezel, theft, you can't steal. And number 7, Eva Min Achai, you cannot eat the limb off of a living animal. Okay, that's incredible. Those are the Shemis that's been Noach. Nun Vavam base 56b. So it's important to understand. This is the first opinion. We're going to see that there is a little bit of machlokus about what exactly comprises the Sheva Mitzvos B'nei Noach. Rabbi Chananya ben Gamla Omer, Af ala dam min achayv. Chananya ben Gamla says they're also chayiv for eating blood from a living animal. Okay, Rabbi Chidka says Af ala sirus, castration. Now, both saying Abba Pasha, so we're going to see Bnei Noach aren't allowed to castrate. This means people or animals. Rabbi Shimon Omer Ab ala kishuf. Shimon says they're even chayiv on sorcery. Rabbi Yossi Omer Kala Omer beparshas kishuf Ben Noach musra alav. Rabbi Yossi says anything that's mentioned in the entire section of kishuf, a Ben Noach ultimately again is chayiv for it. The Gemara says, Lo yimatze b'cha ma'avir b'no ubito be'ish, kosim ksamim, ma'onin u'menachish, mechashev v'chov v'chaver, v'shol ov yidone, v'dor shalamesim. So again, we'll say these are all different types of avodah zarah that existed. U'beglala to'avos ha'ila, Hashem elokech amorish osami panecha. And the Torah says, because the nations who inhabited Canaan did all of these things, therefore I, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, am going to displace them. So you see from here that their displacement ultimately again is, or their loss, their defeat is really a result ultimately of their engagement in these sorcerous practices. The Gemara says, "V'lo anash ela imkin hisir." Furthermore, again, Hashem never punishes unless, of course, He first warns. Rabbi Elazar Omer af ala kilayim mutar b'nei Noach libosh kilayim v'lizra kilayim is very interesting. Rabbi Elazar says that when it comes to forbidden mixtures, now remember again, kilayim could take on a couple of different forms. You could crossbreed animals. You could also crossbreed vegetation, plants, right? Different things like that. So Rabbi Elazar says kilayim is mutter for bnei Noach. What does that mean? It's mutter. Libosh kilayim. So for example, a ben Noach could wear shatnez, could wear wool and linen together, but lizra kilayim, and could even go out and plant kilayim together. So you could plant, let's say, for example, grapes and wheat or any other mixture. Ve'inasun ela bahar ba'as behema or bahar kavas ha'ilan. The only thing they're not allowed to do is ultimately, again, to cause interbreeding between animals and to graft trees. So the Gemara says, from where do we know this? So the Gemara says, Am Rabbi Yochanan. So we'll say, again, we're obviously, these are a lot of different opinions over here about what comprises Shem Mitzvos B'nei Noach. We're obviously now going to have to try to figure out where does everyone glean their respective positions from. So where is this from? Am Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Kra, V'ayitzav Hashem Elokim ala Adam le'mar, Mekol ha'etz hagan achol tochal. So we'll say, so interestingly enough, and this is really quite fascinating, it would appear, right beforehand we had the Rabbanon, now Rabbi Yochanan, all quoting this same pasuk. that Shem Mizos B'nai Noach comes from the original command of Hashem to Adam. Because this was the first mitzvah that Hashem gave to Adam. This is the first mitzvah that Hashem gives to humanity. And the Gemara understands this to be a blueprint for Shem Mizos B'nai Noach. So, for example, the Gemara says, Vayitzav, He commanded him, Elu Hadinin. This refers to the obligation to have a judicial system. V'cheinu Omer, Ki adativ l'man asher yitzav ve'esbanav. Hashem, what does Hashem refer to? Zu birchas Hashem. This refers to blasphemy. In other words, a Ben Noach can't curse Hashem. V'cheinu Omer, v'nokev Shem Hashem mos yumas. Good. Elokim. What is Elokim? Zu avodas kochavim. This refers to the prohibition against idolatry. V'cheinu Omer, lo yeh lecha Elohim achirim. Al ha'adam. So again, it's just dissecting the pasuk. On man, zu shvichus damim. This refers to murder. Bechinu omer shovech dam ha'adam ba'adam mos yumas. Lemor, saying, ze gilui arayos. This refers to morality. Bechinu omer lemor hein yishalach ish es ishto v'holcha me'ito v'haisa li'ish acher. So we'll say, so just understand what the Gemara is doing is, the Gemara is seeing that each of these words represent a different halacha, and is showing how this word shows up later on in the Torah in the context of this particular halacha. Incredible. So Gemara says, Mikol eitz hagan, you could eat from all the trees, v'lo gezel, but not from theft. So that's theft. Achol tochal, you could eat, v'lo even min achai. But you can't take the limb from a living animal. Kes Rabbi Yitzchak was a third wine line. When Rabbi Yitzchak came along, Tani Ibcha, he actually understood this in an opposite way. Vayitzav, what is it says? He commanded, Zu avodos kochavim. This refers to idolatry. Right, Elokim, Zudinin. This refers to a judicial system. So Bishlama Elokim Zudinin. I understand that that Elokim is a judicial system. T'chsiv v'nikra balabayis ela Elokim, because again, the pasuk itself, when speaking about adjudicating a case, says that the balabayis, the litigants, will come before the Elohim. Now, in this case, Elohim actually means the judges. But it refers to Shkash Baruch Hu as well. Ella, Vayitzav zu avodah zara maimash. Maharino Vayitzav means avodah zara. Rav Chisda, Rav Yitzchak Barabdi Michad Amar Saru Mahem Min Aderech Asher Tzivisim Asulahem. So we'll say, so one says, they have quickly departed from the path that I commanded them. So again, this was an admonition against avodah zara. Right, they've quickly is by the egel, by the golden calf. They've quickly, so you see over here that derech is also referred to. Vayit asher tzivisim, the path that I commanded them. So command over here is a reference to theology. V'chadamar, the other opinion quotes the pasuk here from Hosea. Ashuk Ephraim Ritzutz Mishpat Kyohil Halach Achar Tzav. So the Gemara says, so once again, you see the same lashon Halach Achar Tzav. So Tzav representing Avodah Zarah. My benayu. So what's practically seen in these two psukim? Igi benayu Akum Sha'asa Avodah Zarah V'lo Hishtachav Ela. It's very interesting. The practical difference in these two opinions would be a Gentile who created, fashioned an Avodah Zarah but didn't worship it. Leman da Amar Asu Mishas Asiyah Mechayiv. So according to the one who learns out from Asu, a Gentile would be liable for Avodah Zarah the moment he fashions the idol, even if he doesn't worship it. Leman da Amar Ki Hoel Halach, but the one who learns it from the second pasuk, Ki Hoel Halach, Ada Azl Basra Palachlei. He wouldn't be chayiv for idolatry until he goes ahead and actually worships it. So says, that doesn't make sense. Amar Rava, Amar Akum Sha'asa Avodah Zarah V'lo Hishtach V'lo Chayiv. Rava says, 1 second. No one holds. Rava asks it, is there anyone who holds that if an Akum makes an Avodah Zarah and doesn't worship it, that he would be chayiv? Is there such a thing like that? So the Gemara says, V'hatanya we learned, Ba'akum dvarim shebezdin shal Yisrael memisin alehen, Ben Noach Musra Alehen, Vein Bezin Sheisra Memisin Alehen, Ein Ben Noach Musra Alehen. This is interesting. So in order to the Bryce says there's a klal. When it comes to an akum, right? When determining the legal liability of an akum, of a Gentile. So the way it works is like this, right? Anything that a Bezin of Yisrael would, right, that a Jewish Bezdin would execute a Jew for, a Ben Noach is also on warrant for. In other words, he would also be liable for that, right? However, again, if Bezdin of Yisrael wouldn't execute the Jew for a particular infraction, then a Ben Noach would also not be held liable for that infraction. So the Gemara says, what does this come to exclude? The following case, an akum who made an avodah zarah but did not bow down to it. He didn't bow down to it. So what do you do in a situation like this? Right? So here's a perfect case, right? If you were to have a Jew who made an idol but did not bow down to it, certainly not good, right? Not good to make any idols. But halacha l'maisa, there's not liability unless, of course, he actually goes ahead and bows down to it. If he doesn't worship it, then there's no liability. Amra Papa. And again, as we just said before, if a Jew doesn't have liability for it, then an akum doesn't have liability for it. Amra Papa, lo lemeute gifok v'nishok. Now we're talking about hugging and kissing an idol. The Gemara says, what does that mean? Gifok v'nishok demai. What do you mean you're hugging and kissing the idol? If the normal way to worship the idol was to hug it and kiss it, then everybody's liable for that. Rather, it's talking about over here, even shelo kidarka, meaning, let's say the derech of this particular idol is not to be hugged and kissed. So in this type of fashion, again, even if one hugged and kissed it, there would not be liability because one is only chayv in avodah zarah for what we'll call normative worship of the avodah zarah. Okay, incredible. Dinin, b'nei noach, ifkin. So Moshe says, now let's go back, let's go through the list. So when it comes to setting up a judicial system, is that true that b'nei noach are obligated in this? But we learned Vatanya, Esra mitzvos nestavi yisrael b'mara. Claudius was commanded 10 mitzvos in Mara. Sheva shekiblu aleim b'nei noach. Now 7 of them were, now when we say they were given 10 mitzvos, really, there were 7 pre-existing mitzvos that Bnei Noach already had. V'osifu aleihen dinin v'shabes v'kivod avayim. And in Mara there are 3 more added. Dinin, the obligation to establish a judicial system. Shabbos and kivod avayim. So the Gemara says, Dinin dichsiv. How do we know that Dinin were added at Mara? Remember again, Mara, we just had this in last week's parasha. Mara was the first stop after Kriyas Yamsuf. Right, after we left the banks of the Red Sea, Moshe Rabbeinu takes us, right, we traveled for 3 days in the desert, we couldn't find water, they came to a place called Mara. Why was it called Mara? Because the water was bitter. A beautiful verse by the Baal Shem Tov, the pasuk says, they were unable to drink the water, ki marim heim. Now, normally we translate that to mean the waters were bitter. But the Baal Shem Tov says that it should have just said, ki marhu, the water singular was bitter. What does it mean, ki marim heim? They were bitter. The Rebbe says it wasn't the waters that were bitter. The Jews were bitter. And when a person is bitter, even the sweetest of waters has a bitter taste. In other words, your perspective impacts everything. A positive perspective, the world looks beautiful and incredible. A positive perspective, even the most daunting of challenges becomes an opportunity for personalistic growth and transcendence. On the other hand, a negative attitude, even the greatest bracha, even the sweetest of waters, becomes something overwhelming, negative, and troubling. Life is always a matter of our perspective. Incredible. So at Mara it says dinin. What do they get dinin? Dichsiv sham sam lo choku mishpat. Okay, Shabbos v'kibud avayim dichsiv kasher tzivcha Hashem elokecha, as Hashem commanded you. V'amar Rav Yehuda kasher tzivcha b'mara. Now again, remember that's the lashon over here. Torah, both by Shabbos as well as by kibud avayim, use lashon of kasher tzivcha, as Hashem commanded you. So we're understanding over here as Hashem commanded you previously back in Mara. Okay, Rav Nachman bar Avua. So the point over here is, how can you say? The way the Gemara is setting this up over here is that halacha l'maisa, the Jews already had the 7 Noachide laws before Mara. In Mara, they got 3 more halachas. Or the 3 more halachas, dinin, obligation to set up a judicial system, kibud avayim, honoring parents, and number 3, Shabbos, for a total of 10 binding halachas about Klal Yisrael. Here's the problem. We just said before that dinin, establishment of a court system, was already one of the 7 Noachide laws. If that's the case, then what are they receiving in Mara? To which the Gemara says, what's going on over here? Now in Mara, what they got were more legal details, namely that halacha l'maisa, if you're going to adjudicate the capital case, it has to be done with a basin of 23, right? And the concept of witnesses and the concept of hasra. So in other words, there was a concept of establishing a judicial system that was always part of Noachide law. But the details of it, right? The specific framework that was given at Mara, ihachi, mai v'hosifu aleihen dinin. So then again, what does it mean when the Gemara says that ultimately again dinin was added on? It sounds like they're receiving something extra, not just details. Interesting. that Shev Mitzvos B'nai Noach were the establishment of a legal system was what we'll call for normative law. Normative law, right? Again, financial cases, even capital cases. What were B'nai Noach not empowered to adjudicate? Knessos, penalty cases. And in Mara, they got the concept of Knessos, penalty cases. Akati, Vahosifu b'dinin miboyle, but still it should have said Vahosifu b'dinin, not Vahosifu dinin, because Vahosifu dinin makes it sound like the laws of a judicial system were added on in Mara. But if you tell me they had the judicial system, but rather again they were just given something extra like Knessos, then it should have said Vahosifu b'dinin. Ela amarav acha bar Yaakov lo nitzcha ela lahoshiv bezin b'chol plach uplach u'b'chol ir ve'ir. Rather, again, interestingly enough, as part of Shev Mitzvos B'nai Noach, they were given the obligation to establish a judicial system. And in Mara, they were given the obligation to establish a Beis Din in every city, right? Called plach uplach, literally in every neighborhood and every city. Every city. Local Batei Din. Local Batei Din. The B'nai Noach lo ifkid, Bar B'nai Noach, not obligated to do that already. V'atanya k'shem shenitztav Yisrael lahoshev batei din b'chol plach uplach b'chol ir ve'ir kach nitztav b'nei Noach lahoshev batei din b'chol plach uplach b'chol ir ve'ir. But that's not true. The Gemara says the same way that Jews were obligated to go ahead and make batei din in every city and in every locale, every city. So to b'nei Noach, ala amarava hay tana be'ei menashehu demafech dach va'ayol sach. You're right. We'll say, so this Tana has a different opinion as to what the Shev Mitzvos B'nai Noach was. He takes out Dach. Dach is Dinin and Birchas Hashem, establishment of a judicial system, and blasphemy. And instead he adds in Sach, which is Sirus, castration, and Chaf for Kilayim. So this Tana has a different opinion as to what comprised the original Shev Mitzvos B'nai Noach, and he actually holds that din in the establishment of the judicial system was not part of the original 7. And therefore, Allah said this is something that Klal Yisrael received for the first time in Mar. The Tana, the Beit Menashe, Sheva mitzvos B'nai Noach, Sheva mitzvos nitztavu B'nai Noach, Avodah Zarah, Givei Arayos, Shichos Damim, Gezel Be'ever Menachai, Sirus Okilayim. So you see from here again, so this is the opinion of B'nai Menashe, right? So the Yeshiva Menashe, they had a different opinion. Shev Mitzvos B'nai Noach were 7 different mitzvos. Now they agree on 5, but they disagree on 2. So whereas the primary opinion said that including Shev Mitzvos B'nai Noach was establishment of a judicial system and blasphemy, the Yeshiva B'nai Menashe, they took it out. Not blasphemy, they take out blasphemy and judicial system and instead replace it with sirus, castration, and kilayim, and grafting. And again, like we saw before with them. So we'll stop up here for today. We're going to pick up tomorrow with a beautiful, beautiful Gemara about Adrian and Rachel. Sorry again that I wasn't with you in person today, and sorry for the last minute cancellation this morning of the live share. But thank you for the opportunity to learn with all of you, and wishing everyone a great day.